this spending pattern. But it's even more difficult to justify this spending pattern on subsidies when you realize that the system is characterized by fraud, leakages, and inefficiencies. When you know that a lot of this fuel gets smuggled across the neighboring countries because sometimes the price differential is as much as 100%. When you know that the marketers themselves, the margins, they are basically, we have a system where they are guaranteed certain amount. The subsidy has to be paid to them. So all the risks are shifted to the government. They have privatized the profits, and the risks and inefficiencies have been nationalized. They have no incentive. They have no incentive whatsoever to cut costs because they are guaranteed. We paid $1 billion in storage. We paid so much money in demurrage every last year. So much money when we looked at the template, the pricing template for this petroleum. Huge amounts of money. There's the marketer's margin, which is guaranteed. Then there is the demurrage cost, there's the transportation cost. It costs more to deliver petroleum from the ports in Lagos to the hinterland than from the ports outside in Europe. Yes, it's true. It is true. It's a very inefficient system than what it costs to transport it from these countries to our country. And we also had anecdotes of sharp practices where ships would come loaded with fuel, they take record of it, as having this, they will offload it. Presumably they have offloaded everything, but in reality they don't offload everything. They have got subsidy on the whole shipload of this, and they offload only a fraction of it, and they go to neighboring countries and discharge the rest. So we are ending up subsidizing this. This is what was happening. And this is why the government feels we cannot afford that. And where is this money coming from that we used to pay this subsidy? We are dipping into the excess growth, the monies that have been saved to pay this money. Every year we are taking, either NNPC fails to remit, the national oil company, and you are paying all this money, and we still owe them so much. There is still as much as 400 billion naira that has not been, that is still outstanding in terms of the payments due. That has not been remitted by NNPC, and which NNPC says is on account of subsidies that have been delivered. So this is one area that we are, as I said, engaged in dialogue with the Nigerian population to see how we can really plug these leakages so that this money can be diverted to build roads, to build our education and health institutions, to provide power over a period of time to rehabilitate the railway. One of the other areas also we are working on is in terms of revenue generation. Again, substantial leakages. We have a situation where we have revenue generating agencies of government like Ports Authority, like Airports Authority, and all those that collect incomes. Now, technically, they're supposed to remit this back to the government and they to be properly budgeted for and spent. But what has been happening is that huge amounts of these monies are not remitted. They do their own budget, and their budget has become very elastic. The more revenue they get, the more money they spend. So it's ridiculous. It is. And you are talking about trillions of naira over the years. And unfortunately, some of them have even got the legislation that basically, some of it was, with due apologies, were decreased, and even some legislation that allowed them to use their internally generated revenue to fund their operating expenses. And that basically left a major loophole. And we are trying to address this area again. Basically, what are we trying to do? We are going to audit. We are going to do a comprehensive audit of a process audit, management audit of all the key revenue generating agencies. We're going to make sure that the systems in place, the processes, the procedures, we are going to look at how we can use IT to capture as much as possible the revenues and to make sure that these are duly prompted to government. We are also looking at reforming the customs service. The president set up a presidential task force Again, major weakness there, huge revenue losses. We have one of the key objectives of customs reform to enhance revenue collection, to support, to facilitate trade, to check smuggling, among other things. And we have a high-level task force that is working on that to come up with an action plan for implementation. We are going to launch initiative, revenue enhancement, revenue transparency, accountability and efficiency initiative, retrace initiative. Basically to make sure that the monies are duly accounted for, all revenues, all even taxes that are given and waivers, that these are duly accounted for and that these are duly publicized. We have the fiscal responsibility legislation that has been enacted, and that provides a framework for some of the things we're seeking to do. We are also looking at tapping into non-traditional sources of, rather non-public financing. So we've talked about basically what has happened is in the past we've relied a lot on revenue and so on. We are now trying to deepen reforms in the capital markets so that we can raise more money. The insurance sector, the pension sector, the pension reforms that have been initiated the last 2 years and that have really resulted in huge amounts of money being mobilized and which are not being effectively tapped to invest in infrastructure, and want to create an enabling framework and incentives to be able to expand. And this is why some of these initiatives that are being done by the DMO are important, the Bond Steering Committee, etc. The capital market reforms that are taking place, all of this will help and broaden the scope for tapping into the domestic capital market. We also, in terms of promoting, we feel that in the present context, we can't run away from the necessity of diversifying the Nigerian economy. Unfortunately, one of the key challenges in the past has been for the industrial manufacturing sector, for example, availability of power supply. And the government is aggressively tackling this. We have made progress with the National Integrated Power Project, which brought together the state and federal government to fund new power plants as well as rehabilitate existing ones. We have set stretch targets and we're moving aggressively to meet those. Admittedly, we're having major challenges with gas supply to these power stations, even as we move to raise the generation capacity, because most of these are gas-based. So next year, we are going to look at, in the next year's budget, trying to diversify the sources of fueling these power plants, looking into coal-fired generators, turbines, looking at enhancing hydro capacity. Unfortunately, these things take time. Hydro plant, constructing hydro plant, it's a 3-4 year undertaking. And this is why it's taking so long for these results to manifest themselves. But we are also looking at roads. We are looking at the railway sector rehabilitation to open up new areas to really facilitate economic activity in other sectors. We have got initiatives in the agriculture sector. There's a special presidential initiative that involves intervention across the entire value chain of agriculture, huge amounts of money to support production, distribution, and marketing, and particularly to strengthen commercial agriculture development. We are tapping into resources from the Natural Resources Fund, as well as